Good afternoon, everyone. Now, I'd like to introduce our first speaker. I'd like to introduce you to Ms. Lauren Levy.
Good afternoon. My name is Lauren Bud Levy, and I have been working with people with kidney disease for about the last 8 years. And I have worked with, in dialysis, with home hemo patients, peritoneal dialysis patients, in-center 3 times a week dialysis patients, and nocturnal dialysis patients. And through my time, I have learned so much from every individual that I have had the opportunity to talk to and work with. And so I'm hoping to share my, as a healthcare professional, perspective of the best way to eat your way through kidney disease today. And as we do this, we'll talk about just very briefly what kidneys do to kind of put it in perspective of why you might feel the ways that you do. Goals for you, and that's your own personal goal. Nutrition step by step, so regardless of maybe what place kidney disease affects you all, hopefully you'll be able to have some take-homes from that. Transplant, and then putting it all together. So the kidneys work as a filter. They remove extra water, any solutes, toxins, and drugs. They also secrete hormones and produce the active form of vitamin D. So the vitamin D that we receive from the sun and on our skin, the last place that it is used in our body, or the last place that it is activated before it's used, is in the kidneys. And so that's why many of you are on vitamin D. As well as it controls the production of red blood cells, and that's where that anemia that many of your healthcare team talks about. And red blood cells carry oxygen, and so that's where some of feeling tired comes from too. And so I bring that to your all's attention because that's what affects a lot of people, is that feeling of tiredness and why do my blood levels go up, and I try really hard. And so it is those functions of the kidneys that directly affect those laboratory outcomes that you work with your healthcare team on. So what you eat can help you control the buildup of waste products and improve how you feel at every stage of kidney disease. And those waste products are not inherently bad. That's what the extra that your body would have used and then released in your urine. And so it's not that any one person is abusing themselves in any form, but what it is just a little bit extra that you can no longer handle as well. So as a healthcare professional, the goal of nutrition therapy when I work with people is to maintain nutrition health at an optimal level. Prevent buildup of waste products from the food that you eat. Balance fluids and electrolytes, preventing any extra water weight. Preserving kidney function for as long as possible. And that is always the goal before you reach the point of needing dialysis or a transplant, is to hold on to as much function as you can. So those are my goals when I think about working with people, but that's very clinical. And so your goals may be different. And when I work with people, that's really what I try and get to the point of, is what is it that is important for you? What is it that makes you happy and what you want? Because I want to help you get that goal. Sometimes it is getting your phosphorus down, but other times it's something like, I want to play with my grandkids. I don't want to be exhausted at the end of the day. And so as we go through this presentation, I want you to take a second and think about what your goal may be that affects your life, and see if you can, throughout our discussion, maybe pick up a thing here or two that I discuss that you could work towards that would make you fit that goal. So by eating better or by increasing activity, you might have more energy. making a little changes in your diet here or there, it can affect much more in your quality of life. So preserving kidney function. Controlling blood pressure is very important, and decreasing salt can be one of those ways that you do that. Managing blood sugars if you are someone who has diabetes, and trying to keep those blood sugars controlled so that you are not injuring your kidney any further by having high blood sugars, and you're also not facing low blood sugars at the same time. So avoiding or limiting desserts, candies, sweetened beverages, limiting eating consistent meals throughout the day instead of 1 or 2 large meals, trying to keep your blood sugar at a good range as long of the day as you can, so you're not seeing these highs and lows. Pay attention to portion size. It is very easy to eat more than one portion in a recipe, because a portion and a serving can be very different things. What they serve you at a restaurant is different than what one single portion is in that recipe. And increasing physical activity. So keep in mind, because everyone is in a different path in life and in a different spot, is diet instructions differ based on stage of kidney disease, dialysis modality, and your labs. So everyone has a little bit more, a little bit less wiggle room when it comes to your diet. So if your health professional, your dietitian, your doctor, your nurse has talked to you about something specific that doesn't necessarily meet what we talk about today, it doesn't mean that either of us is wrong. It means that you may have a little bit more wiggle room or less wiggle room. Anything in a larger portion can be a little bit too much. Calories. They provide energy to keep our body running. And so we want to make sure to be able to eat enough that we are running well and not gaining weight, to try and maintain a good body weight. For some of us, we may need to gain weight, and working with your healthcare professional is important, and increasing either meals or portion sizes if you need to gain weight, and conversely the opposite if you have been told that you need to lose a little bit of weight, whether it's for transplant or for general health, that is appropriate as well. But what we do not want is for you to lose muscle mass. And so keeping as active and limiting extra sugars or carbohydrates can be an easier way to reduce your calories without reducing your protein if you are on dialysis. And so you can see, even whether you have chronic kidney disease not requiring dialysis, hemodialysis, peritoneal dialysis, the calories are all about the same. But if you do peritoneal dialysis, the dialysate contains sugar, and you actually receive, depending on the type of dialysate you're using, a different amount of calories. And so that needs to be taken into account, how much you actually eat, because you're receiving some already, even though you're not eating it, it's getting absorbed. And if that applies to you, talking to your dietitian about how many calories that is for you is important, because especially if you're someone who may have diabetes, those are sugars that you're receiving, your body's receiving, but you're not eating. And then transplant, the main goal is to maintain an optimal weight and adjust based on a weight trend, and working with your healthcare team to make sure that you know where they want you to be is important as well. So putting it into perspective, because that's nice to hear 30 to 35 calories per kilogram, but that doesn't really mean much to any one person unless you can put it into perspective. So if somebody weighs 150 pounds, 1 pound or 2.2 pounds is 1 kilogram. And in dialysis and in kidney disease, we work in kilograms. And so that's 68 kilograms. So for those people who are on dialysis, stepping onto that scale in whatever center you are in, you know what that number is. And so it looks closer to, for somebody on chronic kidney disease who weighs 150 pounds, about 2,000 to 2,380 calories per day. And then you can see for the peritoneal dialysis people that it's closer to 1,840 to 2,180. And it's not because they need less, it's because that you're absorbing more from the dialysis. You're actually absorbing that sugar. And so it's important to think about that because you can inadvertently gain extra weight or have to worry about blood sugar because of that. And then transplant, and you may need less calories if medications cause weight gain. Oftentimes, people who have transplants as well, you've been limited on all of those wonderful foods for so long that you've wanted, and now you get the opportunity to eat those. And so staying focused on, it's very often that you can gain weight after a transplant. And protein. I am sure for all of those of you in here who may be on dialysis, protein may be your friend and your foe, depending on what day of the week it is. And so protein works to build and repair muscles and tissues. And dialysis is a process where it takes protein. And so if you have chronic kidney disease and you're not on dialysis, protein can make your kidneys work more. And so you may be asked by your physician at that point to limit the amount of protein to try and preserve what you can. And so make your kidneys work as least as possible. But if you are someone that's on dialysis, all of a sudden, after you've been told for however long, maybe years or just months, to not eat as much protein, then you come to dialysis and somebody like me walks up to you and says, I need you to eat a palm size of protein 3 times a day. And that is totally opposite of what you've been told. And that is because once you are now facing dialysis in any form, it uses protein. And now we're trying to make sure that we maintain your nutrition status, your muscle mass, and your ability to do all the things that you like. Proteins also maintain bones and skin and hair. They make enzymes, hormones, and other body chemicals to fight infections. And so the normal lab value is greater than 3.4, but in dialysis we work at 4.0. And the reason that is just based on research trends of that there's a decreased risk of hospitalization and doing better on when you do go to the hospital if your albumin is at 4.0. And so we want you to stay in as good of nutrition health as possible. So estimating these protein needs. If you are somebody who is who has chronic kidney disease, you're going to be asked by your medical team to eat about 0.6 to 0.8 grams per kilogram of subjective body weight or adjusted body weight. So the body weight target that your healthcare professional sets for you. And that's maybe the weight you're at, or it might be the weight they say you should get to. If you're on hemodialysis, it is 1.2 grams. You see it's a little more. And then if you do peritoneal dialysis, it is a little bit more, 1.3. And that is because peritoneal dialysis does take a little bit more protein from you. And then transplant right after surgery is 1.3 to 2 grams per kilogram body weight, and that's for healing purposes, and just right after transplant. And then after that, it goes back down to maintenance of 0.8 to 1 gram per kilogram body weight, which is the amount that is the target for someone who does not have chronic kidney disease. So back to our example patient or person, Mr. B, who was 150 pounds, to put that into perspective, if his target, if he weighs 150 pounds, is actually 41 to 54 grams per day. Then once he goes on to dialysis, to hemodialysis, it's 82 grams a day. So that's a big change to make in a short time. And then if he was to do peritoneal dialysis, it goes up a little bit more to 88 grams, 82 to 88 grams. And then right after transplant, 88 to 136 grams of protein per day, which is a lot. But that's a short period after which, and then it goes down to maintenance. So prior to dialysis or kidney disease, 54 to 68 was the target, and that's the target going forward. So what are good protein sources? Meat, fish, poultry, eggs, and 1 ounce is 7 grams of protein. And so when I talk to my patients, oftentimes I talk in palm sizes to give an estimate. And usually between 3 to 4 ounces per meal is what you're looking for, depending on your body size, depending on how many times a day you eat. But these plant proteins, depending beans, lentils, tofu, nuts, and seeds, depending on your phosphorus level and depending on what your healthcare team says, are possibilities. They do have protein. And so they can also be an option depending on your personal situation and what medications you've been prescribed. Fluids. Fluids are something that we're talking about more and more as a healthcare team and trying to preserve and help people's heart function. The kidneys regulate fluid balance and restrict fluids based on your urine output. So anything liquid at room temperature, ice, water, tea, jello, juice, ice cream, coffee, all beverages, soups, and gravy, they are all counted in your fluid total. And so if you have chronic kidney disease, you may not be restricted for many of the time that you're prior to needing dialysis. And then once you get to be on hemodialysis, we work towards a 1 liter plus how much you pee. And that is because we're trying not to take too much at any one dialysis treatment. Just like it's not very good for people with diabetes to have those real high blood sugars and real low blood sugars, those ups and downs of gaining a lot of weight, taking a lot of water, and back and forth. That's hard on your heart, hard on your body. And so trying to limit the amount that you drink, limit the amount of salt that you eat, is always important to try and keep as easy as possible on your body, because when you're on dialysis, whatever form of dialysis is working for you for your kidney function, but you want to maintain health throughout your whole body. And that goes a lot with this fluid. So many people have problems if you're a smaller individual and you don't dialyze as long. Your healthcare professional might come talk to you and say, I know you're doing really well, but we're taking it too quickly. I don't want it to take it too quickly because your blood pressure's dropping. If you're in that situation, you may need to pull back on your fluid intake or think about increasing the time on dialysis to try and make it a little easier on your body. So an example of fluid restriction. 1 liter is actually 4 cups, 4 8-ounce cups. And if you had 500 milliliters of urine output, then that's a 1,500 milliliter fluid restriction, which is 6 cups a day. So if you're someone who has absolutely no urine output, I talk to my patients about half a cup in the morning with medication maybe, then 1 cup at breakfast, 1 cup at lunch, 1 cup at dinner, and a half cup before bed with medicine. The other thing that we talk about a lot is going home and looking at the things that the cups and the mugs you use, because oftentimes I think when I come to work, oh, I had a cup of coffee in the morning, but my cup of coffee is probably 12 to 16 ounces, and that would be 2 of my 4 cups right out the door. And so I always recommend you take a measuring cup and you pour it into the glasses you use, and you see where 8 ounces is. And then you can either draw, I've had some people draw a line with like a Sharpie on it, and then they know, or you can eyeball it. And then at least you have a better estimate of where you measure up in your household cups, because that's where we're mostly drinking from. But in those cases that you might not be eating or drinking inside your house, we have to think about typical sizes, and fluids are so hard to estimate in a cup, in to-go cups. And so an average can of soda is 12 ounces, so that's 1.5 of your cups of 4. The average water bottle is 16.9 ounces, and the can of soup is 18.5 ounces. And so all of that ends up in our fluid restriction. So if I woke up in the morning and I had breakfast and I had a water bottle with my Cheerios and dry Cheerios, and then at lunch I had a can of soup and I had a Coke with that, I'd be way over and done for the whole day, way over. So it's really hard. And then when we go out to eat, it gets a little bit tougher on trying to estimate. And so even when you're ordering the small at McDonald's, that's still 2 of your 4 cups. And the big gulp, especially in the summer, and a lot of people I used to work with that like to go and get ice from the big gulp. They liked the big gulp and they'd fill it with ice, and it was great in the summer. But that's 32 ounces, and although ice is not as dense as water, it is still water. And so here's your whole day in a small big gulp. And so when you plan out your meal for the day, or you plan out how your day is going to look, trying to figure out some of those tricks that work for you. Maybe it's something like a water bottle that you know has 500 milliliters in it, and you carry that around all day. You get your 8-ounce cup of coffee in the morning, you got your 500 milliliters of water, and then you have some wiggle room on what you want that last thing to be. And so trying to think about what works best for you. I've also had people who they would either use a 1-liter water bottle, and they just like to drink mostly water, and then they would pour little bits out, and they knew when they could stop when it was done. Conversely, I've had people who like to pour into the 1 liter, and then when it's done, they're done. They either use that water for the next day, or they water their plants, or they do something with the water. But that helps them to know when it's best for them to stop. So sodium, it regulates the amount of water in the body, and so it goes straight in with limiting fluids. And eating too much salt can increase thirst. It can increase blood pressure and edema and overwork your heart and lungs. And that really is always the goal, is to maintain your body in the best form we can. And so if you are someone who has chronic kidney disease, you might not be told to have a direct number that you're going for on salt or sodium, but you should limit your diet to a no added salt. That means add salt in your cooking, what the recipe says possibly, but not at the table. And if the recipe calls for a lot of salt, maybe halving or omitting. Once hemodialysis patients and peritoneal dialysis patients are asked to do 2,000 milligrams or 2 grams, which is the daily value. So that's what you see on food labels. And then for transplant, just to control your blood pressure. And so when we look at, again, how much sodium is in salt. 1/4 of a teaspoon has 590 milligrams of sodium. So the little bit that you sprinkle can add up quickly. So it's just good to be aware of where you might overdo it. Any type of seasonings that do not contain salt, so garlic, not garlic salt, lemon, all that stuff, that's all okay. But when you get to the garlic salts and things, some of your Cajun seasonings, looking for salt-free versions are important, but remembering to read the label to make sure they don't contain potassium, because sometimes they can sneak a little potassium in there. So we're not trying to get rid of all of your spices by any means, but other hidden sources of salt can be in condiments, soy sauce, fish sauce, barbecue sauce, and processed meats, deli meat, cured meats. Fast food and frozen meals tend to be also, and then canned foods. So of all these pictures here, we've got cup of noodle, cornflakes, a slice of pizza, ham, canned veggies, chicken noodle soup, 4 slices of turkey, 2 slices of bread, and 1 slice of American cheese. Which do you think is the highest in salt?
The chicken noodle soup.
Chicken noodle soup. It is actually the cup of noodle, but that's pretty much the same. I mean, it's just different brand, right? 1,000 milligrams in the cup of noodle soup. And so it quickly adds up. If you were to have made yourself a ham and cheese sandwich from these specific cheeses and breads, it would have been 870 milligrams of salt. Or sodium, I'm sorry. And so reading labels to try and find out how much sodium is actually in the foods is important, because it doesn't mean that you can't have a food. It just means that you might want to choose a different brand or be aware of the portion size. And this is an example from the CDC on how sodium can add up quickly. And so if you had a bowl of cereal and skim milk at breakfast, 250 milligrams of sodium. At lunch, if you had a cup of soup and a turkey sandwich, that's kind of a common meal. That's 2,200 milligrams of sodium. And then dinner, a slice of pizza and a salad is 3,100 milligrams of sodium. And so if we think about that cup of noodle, had this cup of soup and a cup of noodle, you would have been a lot closer and chosen something different with your turkey sandwich. So it's all about how you spend your time and your salt money. Where if you want to have a large amount of salt in the middle, and then nothing on the sides, whatever gets you to 2,000, and that's where you stop. And that kind of works for phosphorus, potassium, fluids. Thinking about if you're gonna have a cheat day or a cheat meal, then making sure the rest of the day kind of you go back straight and narrow. So food labels are confusing, but can be your best friend. And this food label, the thing I like about this is it talks about, I'm going to use this for sodium. So for a snack, you want about 5% or less for a snack. And for a meal, you're looking for about 20%. So if you're above those are kind of good guidelines to see. But you want to make sure that you're checking what the serving size is and the servings per container. Drinks are really into this. If you look at drinks that you might have, sometimes you look at whether it's the calories or whatever, and you're like, oh, okay, this is for the whole bottle. But no, it's 1 of 2 servings. So you want to make sure anything that has a package that you read it and know what you're looking for. So 1 serving has 660 milligrams of this food and is about 28%, or is 28%. So it's only 1 cup. So if this was something that you were going to eat as your main meal, then you just want to be aware that that's just a tad bit a little over. So the best way to eat less salt is to eat fresh food and home-prepared foods. And the less salt you use, the longer your taste buds do adjust. I'm sorry, they do.
Yeah.
I very much appreciate that. Yes, they do. In fact, I've been, for the last 10 years, slowly decreasing my husband's salt intake, not that he has ever known that. And then we go out and he's like, wow, this is salty. I always feel good as a dietitian that I'm doing something right. Eating more fruits and vegetables, skipping the salt, paying attention to condiments. The thing about home prepared foods, right, is it takes a lot of time and energy. It is important, it's worth it. The thing that I like to do in my own self is to try and cook 2 meals at a time. And when I cook 2 meals at a time, I do a 1-pan roasting meal. I might take chicken breast and some vegetables, do a little bit of garlic and pepper and olive oil, stick it in the oven and roast it. And then I might also do either a slow cooker meal or some type of skillet meal. So that I'm only chopping everything up at one time, I'm only preparing it at one time, and then I use it for multiple days. So that if I'm going to cook, then I'm getting the most bang for my buck. And then you know what's in it because you made it. And especially chicken breasts and things like that, looking at the food labels on frozen chicken breast is important because sometimes they do hide salt in there too, and preservatives. So potassium, that helps muscles and nerves communicate. So too little or too much can be dangerous. And so it is something important to maintain a good level always. And so the lab value that we are looking for patients or people without kidney disease is 3.5 to 5. And then in dialysis is 3.5 to 5.9. And it's tough. It can be tough because you can, especially now we're getting into fruits and vegetables and our gardens and everything, limiting the portion size to 1/2 cup of your fruits and vegetables if you are on in-center hemodialysis or have been told to limit your potassium is important. And so potassium restrictions or amounts, that changes based on where you are in kidney disease. So you only need to restrict if your physician has told you that you might have high potassium. If you are a hemodialysis patient, in-center 3 times a week hemodialysis patient, you may be told to limit to 200 to 300 or 3,000 milligrams a day, which can add up very quickly. If you're someone who does nocturnal in-center hemodialysis or daily or home hemodialysis, you may have less of a restriction. Peritoneal dialysis patients are told often to have 3,000 to 4,000 milligrams a day, and they have to add potassium back and have to focus on some of those higher potassium foods that, if you are on in-center hemodialysis, that we may have said, no, don't do that banana, I can't, your potassium's gonna go high. Well, all of a sudden, if you're doing peritoneal dialysis, you may be asked to actually have the banana or the orange. And then in transplant, it's just keeping potassium in a normal range. So these are examples of low potassium foods, the berries generally, apples, and these are all in 1/2 cup servings. And then these are high potassium foods. I just breeze through that because I want to make sure that I get to the end. So if anyone wants to see that at the end, I can throw those slides back up. Phosphorus is a mineral that builds healthy and strong bones. And phosphorus is something that if you are on dialysis or maybe even before, if you have chronic kidney disease and your doctor has prescribed a phosphorus binder or told you to avoid dairy products, this is why. High phosphorus can lead to bone disease and heart disease. And heart disease is what we want to avoid for sure. So limiting your value to 3.5 to 5.5 is the goal. And the way that we do that is by limiting the amount of high phosphorus foods, as well as taking phosphorus binders, which your physician and healthcare team will talk to you about how to handle based on your personal meal load. And so phosphorus is hard if you are on dialysis. It's not very easy to get the phosphorus to be cleaned out. And so you end up oftentimes really having to restrict. But in transplant, you may need to supplement after that. So the most important thing, regardless of what stage of kidney disease, is maintaining your serum phosphorus in a good range, because that helps to keep your bones healthy and strong. When your phosphorus goes out of range, it causes a cascade of effects that can really increase bone disease and heart disease. So phosphorus is in a lot of things, especially milk products, whole grains, nuts, beans, chocolate. But really where we get into trouble is the added phosphorus in foods that we don't realize it's there. And it's added to our foods to improve taste and increase shelf life. But it's in foods that you would never think, why would they have to have it? So even things like Minute Maid lemonade. Why would lemonade? But it helps as a preservative. And so getting used to reading food labels and being able to spot the phosphorus in the ingredient list is important. And so if you see the words phos, P-H-O-S, that is some form of phosphorus. And you want to either put that down and choose a different product. It doesn't mean you can't have whatever that was. It just means a different brand might formulate it differently. Or you know, okay, this is something I need to have phosphorus binders with. Often other common added phosphorus foods are dark sodas, flavored waters, and iced teas. So if you brew your tea at home, that's fine. But like a lot of the iced teas that you may buy in a bottle, you should read the labels too. And then phosphorus binders, they work like a sponge. And so when you eat something and you take the medicine, it binds the phosphorus in the food and prevents it from ever being absorbed into your GI tract. These are different types of binders on the market. Some bind to a certain degree, and others they just have different levels. And some are chewable, and some are swallowable. And so you end up having to take a lot many times. So finding one that works best for you is important. And if you have one that doesn't work best for you, talking to your physician, your healthcare team about how to find one that does is an important conversation to have, because there are so many on the market that it ends up being a lot of the medicine that people take. Calcium. It's also a mineral that helps us build strong bones, but it works in our heart and our nerves to work in muscle contraction. And so that's why we want to keep it in a good range between 8 to 10.2. And we don't want too much or too little, and especially not too much. This one usually stays in range a little bit easier. And so in chronic kidney disease, oftentimes it's just we want to maintain normal levels, no restriction. In hemodialysis and peritoneal dialysis, restricting to 2,000 milligrams per day from food, dialysate, medications, and binders. And so especially fortified foods that you wouldn't expect, things like apple juice that might say as much calcium as a glass of milk. You probably wouldn't want to choose that apple juice because they've added calcium to it to try and market it to somebody who doesn't drink milk. And as well as Tums and some of those other medications that you might take for stomach upset, they're calcium based. And so that goes towards that calcium total. Other foods, and that's where you're going to get most of it. But other food sources are obviously dairy products, kale, broccoli, sardines. But it's really, those fortified foods really add up quickly. And so vitamin waters, things like that, you want to read those lists for. And sometimes they do have calcium on the food label, but not always. And so you want to also read the ingredient list to see as well. And what I find easiest is once you find a brand and an option that works for you, for your specific situation, every time you go to the store, just go and get that brand next time, so that you're not spending 2 hours at the grocery store because every 5 steps you're picking up and reading a box and making your eyes cross with the ingredient list. And this is an example of how you would make your eyes cross with that ingredient list. So, can you find the phosphorus additives and the potassium additives in here? And you don't have to shout it out because I'm going to show you on the next slide. But there are a fair amount in here. And so we have potassium citrate, magnesium phosphate, potassium chloride, looks like just calcium phosphate, pyrophosphate, and potassium here. And so it is important to pick up anything that comes with a label. I'd say read it. And then once you know this is good, I'm going to keep buying this brand. If this is not, I'm going to find one that works for me. Vitamins. So vitamins are important for growth and activity. The fat-soluble vitamins, A, D, E, K, are not lost during dialysis, but water-soluble vitamins are washed out because they go with the water. So regardless of what type of dialysis that you're doing. So if you have chronic kidney disease, it's recommended that you take a general multivitamin as well as after transplant. But if you are on any type of hemo or peritoneal dialysis, sticking to the vitamin B complex with vitamin C. And that's just because we want to replace what we're taking. And these are the B vitamins specifically. So many people recognize not necessarily B complex, but maybe Nephrovite, Renovite, Dilovite, Renatab, all of those brands. Those are all the same vitamin B complex and C. Sometimes your physician might have you on 1 milligram of folate, that one also. But herbal supplements are something that we want to try and avoid because it can be dangerous with kidney disease. Your kidneys work as a filter, and if the filter is not working as well, those levels can build up very quickly if dialysis doesn't remove it, and we don't know if dialysis removes many of the herbal supplements. And so, as well as they can interact with the medications that you take. So it is important if you're taking some type of herbal supplement that you do talk to your physician or dietitian about it so that they can help you, guide you in a way that works for both your path in life as well as what is safe. But current evidence-based practices suggest that those with kidney disease avoid all herbal supplements. Specific examples of ones that you may want to avoid are especially, these can increase your serum potassium, St. John's wort, alfalfa, dandelion, licorice root, and noni fruit. And then ginseng, and I'm not going to try and pronounce that one, I'm sorry. Cat's claw and red yeast rice. Those are absolute don't use. So if it's something else, you may just want to ask your physician or your dietitian, and oftentimes they won't necessarily just shut you down. They'll go look and see if there's a safe-ish version, but it is going to be recommended that just because you don't necessarily know with herbal supplements what is going in there and how it's going to react with dialysis, that it's not recommended. So now we've gotten to transplant and preparing for transplant, really working to maintain a healthy weight and the goal BMI for your transplant center is very important, and asking what those requirements are and being an active participant with that. And so controlling blood sugar, sticking to your hemoglobin A1C of 7 to 8. So we want to make sure that it's fairly tight controlled, and avoiding hypoglycemia and sticking to that 7. Because poor blood sugars, they delay wound healing. It makes it harder. And so that tight control helps with the wound healing afterwards. And then optimizing your nutrition status. I worked with a dietitian who did transplant, and they were talking mostly about functional status, meaning being as healthy and as active as you can to help be the best candidate. And I once spoke on a board of transplant professionals, and that was my take home I took from one of the transplant professionals. The best candidate you can be for transplant is the healthiest person that you can be, because if you can keep your serum levels, your blood sugars, your fluid balance well controlled, you'll be better set up for transplant, you'll be better able to recover and to do well afterwards. And that really has always settled with me after speaking with that person. And so I try and really bring that back with the people that I work with as a motivator too, and for me as a take-home as a clinician. So transplant and beyond. Initially, you may need to eat more calories and protein for healing, but afterwards, as you're getting into all of the new medications, you want to manage side effects for those new medicines. And you want to work with your healthcare professional team and follow whatever recommendations that they make. So based on the specific medications that they prescribe, you may have different side effects. And so controlling weight gain is important, and avoiding certain foods based on those medication interactions, like grapefruit is one, that you may need to do ongoing. And being active, enjoying life and getting back to all those things that you love to do is important for total health. So my take-home points for today is for you to think about what we heard here and put it to where it fits in your path, and really take control and own and go for it. Ask questions and be an advocate for yourself. If there's something that I said that you're like, wait a second, that doesn't work, or I'm not sure with my physician, go ask that physician, say, well, can I do this? How about I try this? Understand your lab results and be a proactive participant in those lab results, instead of, sometimes we get stuck in the, oh, my phosphorus is high again, and it's so hard and it's an uphill battle. Keeping your blood pressure well controlled, making good choices by reading food labels and ingredient lists, especially for things like sodium and those darn phosphorus and potassium additives that still boggle my brain. And be active and move, because again, the best health that you can be today will make you will help to make you the best health that you can be going forward. So this is my reference list and my contact information. Does anybody have any questions, right?
So I'm CKD 4, not on dialysis. At this point, I'm thirsty all the time. I drink, lots and lots and lots. What happens to thirst when you're on dialysis and you have to limit your thirst?
So that is something that is an ongoing thing for lots of people. The first thing is paring back the sodium, looking for hidden points of salt or sodium in your diet is the first thing, because your kidneys aren't able to regulate that sodium level as well, and that's what drives the thirst oftentimes. When you can find those hidden sodium parts and choose something different, that helps thirst. I've had patients who freeze water bottles so they know how much that water is in there already, and use that to help control them. So as the water melts throughout the day, that it helps it last longer, and the cold water they find to be more satiating. As well as sometimes just keeping the dry mouth away, something like gum or a couple like candies and things. And really working towards your goal throughout the day so that you are aware.
I guess I'm wondering, once you're on dialysis, your body is functioning differently, your kidneys are functioning differently. Would that mean that you wouldn't have the thirst in the same way because you're processing everything differently?
Not necessarily, but the more that you dialyze, peritoneal dialysis, home hemodialysis especially, the more frequently you're removing that water. So many times people are working off of maintaining fluid balance, making sure that they're not edematous, and so they can actually drink more because they're dialyzing more often. Does that make sense? So that might be something that you might want to put in the back of your head. Okay?
Can you talk a little bit about the difference effect on kidneys, animal protein versus vegetable protein, plant-based protein?
Yeah. So the question is can you talk about the difference between animal-based protein and vegetable-based protein as it comes to just general protein, right? But the effect on the kidney? So what we're looking for is high quality protein, and typically we think of high quality protein as animal protein, because that is less, it's more that your body will use the protein, less that it's gonna have extra amino acids that your body might already have plenty of and have to break down and get rid of. So typically we think of having at least 50% of your intake being animal protein. Now that doesn't mean you can't be vegetarian. And so the plant-based proteins are becoming actually more and more researched and thought about for dialysis and kidney disease. And it is possible, it's just making sure that with the plant proteins, unfortunately, a lot of times potassium can go out of range and phosphorus. So you can do it, and it's good, and your body processes protein the same way. It's just about how many amino acids are there and what it needs to use and what it needs to get rid of. But you want to manage those other side serum levels, blood levels. Okay, does that answer? Yeah.
Josh.
Thank you. I'm a transplant patient, and recently I developed proteinuria. So protein is showing in my urine, and I know that over long term it will damage the kidney. Now, how do we balance protein intake and with not load the kidney with getting rid of protein, which is hard work, and I understand it damages the nephrons, too much protein. So is there any food that we can take that reduces the proteinuria or not, or how do we balance between having enough protein and not too much protein in the urine? Thank you.
So I'm probably not going to be specific enough for what you're hoping for. But what my recommendation would be is that you work with your transplant physicians and team, because you want to balance, like you said, you want to balance where you're getting enough protein intake and you're not becoming malnourished and you're not injuring your kidneys. And so by asking, what I would recommend is you ask, what is the grams, the amount that you want, that they want you to be your goal. And then from there, once you have those grams, you can portion it out. If 1 ounce of meat is 7 grams of protein, like we saw on that slide, so you have that number, then you can work that into your meal plan throughout the day. That would be what I recommend, because I don't know the background of all of your medical interactions as well. Okay? Yes. Oh, do you have the mic? Do you want to go first, then I'll grab you?
Yeah, so you talked about eating more vegetables and fruits.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think about them in one and the same category, or do you think about them differently?
For the most part, I think of them as the same, because with fruit and vegetables comes a lot of good vitamins, minerals, fiber, and so those are the extra added benefits, as well as that they're low calorie for the amount of bulk that they provide. Okay. Yes. Now I will say sometimes like watermelon has so much water in it, it's just about considered a fluid. There is always an exception to the rule. Right? Yes.
Okay, I'm a dialysis patient. Okay, now I've been having complications this week, so I haven't been dialyzed this week pretty good. So, how would I know if I'm eating too much or taking too much? Because I haven't been dialyzed, and I'm scared I might get sick.
So I would always encourage you to dialyze as often and as long as your physician prescribes, because that prescription that your physician decides on is paired to you individually. And so coming to treatment and staying the whole length is very important, as well as working with your dietitian and healthcare team on your monthly lab work that the dietitian will review that also will help you too. If you're noticing edema on your feet, hands, eyes, all that stuff, that is definitely extra water, as well as shortness of breath. So that's another reason why you want to make sure to go to dialysis frequently, because to get that extra water out, okay? Okay, one more question, I guess.
I tend to be more plant-based diet for my after my kidney removal. I like garbanzo beans. I like the S&W at the store, but S&W's come out with 2 versions now. One has it's supposed to be heart healthy, yet it has more sodium, and then on the nutritional label on the bottom, it's got a few I don't even know what it is, ingredients on there.
Okay.
Would it be, and the regular garbanzo bean has fewer sodium content. Would it be better to use the one the generic or the regular garbanzo, or because it says heart healthy, the other one, is there some added ingredients that might be doing you better, more good, or?
So that's a really good question. A heart healthy can be marketing. It can also be that the portion size might be small enough that the sodium content is lower, but you've done a really great job by reading the food labels to see that the higher salt content is there. So I would recommend the lower salt option. The thing about canned fruits, vegetables, beans that you can do is put them in your colander and rinse them, and that rinses a lot of the salt away. And so that's one way that you can lower the amount of salt that you get to.
Okay.
I'm at a high topic phosphorus level in my lab test. I can't seem to get under 5.7. How harmful is that overall? I mean, it's been up to 6 a few times.
So phosphorus is something that we think about as a long-term control that we want to get into control. 5.7, like you said, is just a tad high. The normal range, if I didn't bring it to anyone's attention, is 2.4 to 4.5. So ultimately, even that 5.7, even though it's a tiny bit higher than the target, is still high. And although it is very hard, I would recommend trying to get it down under 5.5 because it affects your bone health and heart disease risk. And so whether it requires maybe looking at some of those food labels, especially drinks, maybe you could find some extra hidden phosphorus that you could choose something different, or maybe thinking about talking to your healthcare team about a different phosphorus binder that might work better, bind a little bit more for what you need.
Is phosphorus a long-term effect?
It is. So phosphorus can help drive your bone disease risk through multiple factors. And so ultimately it can pull some of that calcium out of your bones, and phosphorus and calcium work together, and they can settle in your arteries and in your joints, and it can also cause itching as well as hardening of the arteries and painful joints. So it is something you want to work to try and pull down.
There's dangerous stroke.
As well, yes.
But it takes a while to get it done, even if you are being.
Oh, you can get your serum phosphorus down within a few days. If whatever you can find where that's really that trigger, that extra bit that you can't seem to find or get to, if you can get there, it'll come down within a few days. Okay?
One more.
Oh.
Yeah, I have a kidney renal disease. My function, it goes up and down. from 20 to 40. And when it went down to 20, my doctor was very concerned. And he said, what have you been doing? I said, I've been eating good. I was eating kale, salmon, avocado. And he said, those are all high in potassium. And he said that you have to slow down on that. As far as my weight is concerned, it's good. But I'm just passing this on to everybody because that's what happened to me when I thought I was doing good by eating good food. But he told me it's wrong because he said you are eating, instead of eating more carbohydrates, I was eating more avocado, mango, and other stuff that he told me that is very high in potassium and it's very bad for kidney.
Yes, so the toughest part about where you are kidney disease affects everyone individually is every person's body is a little bit different. And the very hard part about the diet is many foods that we, like you said, kale, salmon, avocado, that you see in the media and that is good for us, can become too much depending on how well your kidneys are working. And so following your physician's recommendations, because some people are able to still have the kale and the mango and the avocado, so following what your physician says is important. And then the salmon is good, solid protein, but especially if you have chronic kidney disease and you're not on dialysis yet, you want to limit the portion size. You still need it, but you want to limit the portion size because it might be making your kidneys work too hard. And that's all based on where you are in that stage, in that space and time.
Okay, we have time for one more. Gentleman over here.
Thanks very much, it's great talk. Why is one serving of vegetables half a cup cooked or 1 cup raw? I don't understand why.
Yeah, I know. When you cook vegetables, especially now, many vegetables condense. And so that's why it's a half cup raw or a half cup cooked. So oftentimes, you think about if you cook tomatoes, they mush down. And so that same amount raw, cup raw, when you cook it, it actually becomes a half cup. Things like that. Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, things like asparagus is
Some things like asparagus get a little bit confusing for sure, but I would ultimately stick to the half cup servings, as well as sometimes if it's raw too, think about spinach or lettuce of some sort that bulking, and when it's raw it's all big and 1 cup, but then you cook that 1 cup down and it comes to little bits.
because they dehydrate.
Yeah, it breaks down, yeah. But I just want to say thank you for letting me come and speak today. I really appreciate it.